Hello class, using the help of the table found on pages 36 and 37 of our textbook, I'll be talking today a little bit about the grammar translation method and the total physical response, TPR, and the natural approach methodology. The grammar translation method is one of the foundational methods of language learning. This was during a time when little thought was given to teaching someone how to actually speak the language. Languages weren't learned for the sake of communicating, but rather for scholarly purposes. Language knowledge was based solely on grammatical knowledge for the means of translating from the second to the native language and reading comprehension. Because the focus was strictly on grammatical knowledge, it wasn't necessary for the teacher to actually be fluent in the target language. And since reading and grammatical rules were the primary focus of this method, classes were to be conducted in the student's native language. Teachers would teach the students the grammar rules of the L2 through the use of their L1 language. In this type of classroom, the teacher is the absolute authority. They are the only source of knowledge. Critical thinking, discussion, and heated debates aren't something you would ever see, nor would you have the concept of let's ask the class or collaborate with a peer and form your own ideas and share with the class. The teacher knew all and taught all. And in this method, student assessment is very objective. There is a clear right and wrong answer. The teacher would respond to student errors in a similar way that you would see in a math classroom. There is one right answer. Refer back to the taught formula, and try again. Assessments came normally through translation exercises from the target language into the student's native language. One strength of this method is that it helped develop really strong readers. Though fluency and critical thinking skills are a weakness of this method, I can see why it was so popular and why it still exists in some forms today. If your goal didn't involve oral communication, then practicing it would be pointless. Also, I think this method is able to quantify language gains. Student growth, knowledge acquired, language acquisition is all measurable. Furthermore, depending on the culture you find yourself in, this idea of a set power dynamic where a teacher runs the show might be more comfortable for some students. And finally, as our book states, as we learn more about teaching methodologies, we will understand just how theoryless this grammar translation method truly is. And I think that when looking at the other teaching methodologies, you can see the level of thought that went into devising each method and the cross-disciplinary research that was done, the higher level thinking skills that were implemented. But when you analyze the grammar translation method, you just don't see that level of care put into it. If we were to do a total 180 from the grammar translation method, we might end up somewhere in the realm of total physical response and the natural approach. The total physical response method was established by James Ather in 1977, and he capitalized on the trace theory, which was developed by psychologists. It essentially means that memory is increased when paired with a related motor function. In the classroom, total physical response, or TPR, is especially used for teaching commands, like if you tell your students to open their books, you mime opening a book, or telling someone to close the door has a parallel action. However, it can be used for things other than imperatives. Even adjectives like big and small, you can hold your arms wide open to show the word big, whereas you use the distance between two fingers to represent small. Total physical response is truly hands-on learning. This is definitely a lower stress language learning method. In fact, when Asher devised the method, he wanted to make it as stress-free as possible. Total physical response engages the student in listening and acting. This method doesn't push students to speak early on, but rather waits until the student feels comfortable to jump in when they are ready. Piggybacking off of TPR, total physical response, we have the natural approach. In this method, L2 acquisition should mirror L1 acquisition. Students are given lots of comprehensible input. And this approach aimed to develop everyday language skills and listening comprehension. Listening comprehension is of great importance here, and the role of the teacher was to provide comprehensible input. spoken language that the student could understand, or things that were maybe just a step above their level. In this method, the teacher is the creator, the maestro, if you will, and the success or lack thereof when implemented in the classroom is heavily dependent on the teacher. Though in the classroom, of course, students were very active. They would collaborate with one another, respond with TPR themselves, and perform role play activities. Naturally, this method saw the most success in beginner classrooms, but lost its charm in more advanced classrooms. I could also see it being most successful with young learners. Children love to play and act and aren't nearly as self-conscious as adults would be. And as previously stated, this method is supposed to be as stress-free as possible, and children would happily follow the teacher in a type of sit-up, stand down, TPR action game. But for many adults, the sheer physicality of this method would probably be mildly stress-inducing and make them incredibly self-conscious. One of the more controversial elements of this method was its advocacy of the silent period, the idea of not requiring students to speak until they feel ready to do so. And though it lost popularity over time, this method helped change the game of language learning through its emphasis on comprehensible input and shed light on the importance of developing listening comprehension skills.